Wow, it's an exciting Monday. This is ThinkTech, and more specifically, this is the creative life. It's sort of an introduction to that show being the creative life. And the host of the show in general is Phyllis Blees. And Phyllis Blees joins us now to explain herself about, about the show. Hi, Phyllis. Thank you for joining us from New Hampshire.
You're welcome, Jay. Aloha.
So that it's very interesting because we are living in a time when people are trying to find the characteristics of a better life. They're trying, COVID and other things have made us, put us on a quest here, a quest to find a better, self-improvement. But it's more than that. It's a matter of finding the things that really count. And I've always felt that a creative life, being creative, is good for you. It stimulates you. It makes you feel like you're doing something of interest and value to the community, to yourself, to the world, and so forth. Not everybody feels that way, but I have a feeling that when you get involved in the creative life, you feel that way. So let's talk about you and creativity, Phyllis. You're a lawyer. You're a tax lawyer. You're involved in any number of eleemosynary corporations in Texas, and I suppose with connection in New Hampshire. And you have done many, many things in the 50 years that I know you. 50, count them, 50. Okay. So why creativity? Why creativity now? And what are you doing with creativity? Phyllis, please.
I thank you, Jay. It has been 50 years. uh, why creative now? It's imperative. I think it's be creative or perish. And I not just for the world, but for your soul. If you aren't living your dream, your soulful dream, you're just existing. And I think why Phyllis and creativity, there was a point in time, it was around the 90s, 1990 to 1999, when I first got introduced to the American Creativity Association that I'm president of now, many years later. Whenever I read a book or a magazine that I could mark up, I was circling the word creativity. And I would look back through my books and there they were, I'd be circling creativity everywhere in the book. I don't know why. So this isn't a great soulful aha moment. I think it was my intuition or my inner voice was leading me down, just attracting me towards creativity.
Now, for you, what is it?
Creativity.
For you, what is creativity?
For me, creativity, it very much the aha moment sort of notion. It's accessing information and ideas from a different place than just rote thinking. Lateral thinking is one of the things we actually teach in the American Creativity Association. But to be creative is to put soup and cans together and something that you wouldn't have thought of before that was done. It's mash up music these days. But creativity to me is creating something that had never been done before.
Well, so what's lateral? Lateral. What does lateral mean?
Lateral thinking means, so Dr. Edward de Bono taught the 7 thinking caps, and he's written a lot of books on it, including lateral thinking.
Can we take a look at those books now for a moment?
Yeah.
We have, they're the books.
There's some of the books.
That must be 30 books in there in that stack of books.
Those books were written by Dr. Joyce Juntoon, who is a professor at Texas A&M. She teaches degrees in creativity, undergraduate, masters, and PhDs in creative thinking and creativity. And she was the person who introduced me to the American Creativity Association.
So lateral, does she know de Bono?
Yes. Yeah, I know de Bono. I brought him to Austin. Okay. to a conference when Austin was but let me get back to lateral thinking and I'll tell you about Austin and De Bono. So when you're 1 + 1 = 2, that's linear thinking. 1 + A and a glass of orange juice equals the new aha. That's lateral thinking, not 1 + 1 = 2, but a true mashup of different inputs to create something brand new. And that's lateral thinking. So that was the thing that I always attracted me. I was very interested in. How do you think of something that's never been thought of before? And then why creativity? It's because it's exciting.
Great. Let me go back to lateral for a moment.
Yeah.
So is the creative thought, the creative result, a brand new result, or is it merely a result that you had not contemplated in this context for this problem?
Yes.
Which one is, or both?
Yes.
Thank you. I think I got it now. By the way, a footnote about Carol Monley, your friend Carol Monley, who you also know for 50 years. And, the three of us. And she's our executive vice president and chief operating officer. If you didn't know that, you must know that. Okay, it's quite amazing that when you talk about this creativity and lateral thinking and out of the box comes to my mind as a description. I can bat my head against the wall and try to come up with a solution to some problem. And I know, as a moral understanding, I know that if I ask her, she's going to come up with something outside of any option that I identified. As a lawyer, it's all a matter of identifying options, right? And then picking the best one. And before you can pick one, you have to understand all your options. And the more options you can consider, the better your choices are. So, and to me, I think that's lateral thinking in my world, where I ask her a question, I tell her all the options I've identified, and then she says, no. You haven't figured out this other one. You have to include the next option. That might be a better option. And then we have creative thinking. And I guess that's a combination of a new idea or an old idea that we did not incorporate in the problem as an option. Okay. How much of that you want to agree with or disagree with?
I want to agree with it on many levels. One thing I want to talk about is the importance of diversity. So to put yourself in the room, like you've got Carol as a colleague, she's a woman, she's not a man, she has a different perspective. Just right there, you're going to have 200% more options than you did by not getting someone just like you in all respects or close to that. So what we're seeing today, and California is legislated it, they have to have so many women now on every public corporation in California. That's nice for diversity, and I'm all for that. But it's fantastic for creativity. We're going to have new inputs to create new outputs, and that's.
So if I have a room full of diverse directors in a given corporation, and to me, diversity is not only gender; it's like everything.
Yes, it is.
I'm going to identify more options because I have more points of view at the table. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. So when I first met Dr. Joyce Juntoon, who co-founded the American Creativity Association in 1987, so we're the oldest, almost the only creativity association in the world. We are also the oldest. There are a few others, but where you see creativity is through a gateway from a subject matter expert, like all technology or doctors. The American Creativity Association is an umbrella organization to foster the creative life in all walks of life, multidisciplinary. And when I met Joyce Juntoon, she was in Austin, Texas, teaching gifted and talented teachers how to teach gifted and talented students. And I didn't know you could teach creativity. I was sort of stunned There was this teacher, she was a PhD from Texas A&M, being borrowed by the Eames School District in Austin, Texas, teaching their teachers more about being a gifted teacher in the classroom. And she was showing them how you teach students to be creative.
How
And
do you?
huh?
How do you?
Well, I'm just going to give you one example. So alliterative thinking and lateral thinking are like B and C. Just
Alliterative thinking is different than lateral thinking.
yes.
And that's different from thinking. Listen, class, you've got to write these things down because we're gonna have a little test. It's gonna be multiple choice at the end of this half hour, and you better know write that one down. Alliterative thinking. What, pray, is alliterative thinking?
When you engage multiple patterns and then connect them. So let me get to the simplest one. It's a sort of an offshoot of your coming up with a new idea through new input, right? Seeing it in a new way. Joyce had us in the class. So there was a brown bag for parents of gifted students, and I went to the brown bag. And she said, all right, get a piece of paper out, and we're going to do a brainstorming technique. And I want you to write down the first 10 things that you would do with a pencil. So we wrote down the 10 things. And she said, throw it away. Now I want you to write down
The pencil or the pencil or the piece of paper, or both?
about a pen. Throw away your answers to what you could do with a pencil. And away and come up with a second 10. And people shot through the first 10. The second 10, they get to about 12, 13, and they have to think, now what would I do with, and then you get to stick figures, and using it for a barrette in your hair, and and they groan. Oh no, they're groaning. What does she want this for? And she has you go through the whole creating 10 in the second list. And then she says, this is a statistic. When in corporations today, when people have gone through 3 different ideas, they think they've gotten to the end of all possible answers to a problem. And once if they've tried one thing and then another and then yet another. And when they've tried the third one and it doesn't work, they go back to the first one. And they start rotating through. And so it's what they do is everybody in the world pretty predominant. I think this is an amazing statistic. Check out yourself. When you've tried one thing and then another, pushing yourself to try a third way, you think, oh, now I'm done. And you go back to the first one. It's very common. And what you teach people is if you write your list, even your first 10, getting from 4 to 10, you're going to be doing things you never did before. Corporations are going to be doing things they never did before with the simple tool of brainstorming with discipline. So that's a brainstorming technique. That's before lateral thinking. It triggers lateral thinking, but it's just a simple brainstorming technique. And I went, whoa, she's right. Like within 5 minutes, I could see how you could teach. And this anybody can do.
Well, let's go back to the basic creativity thing. Here at ThinkTech, we live in a world of creativity. Every day is a joy because we think of new ideas, we implement new ideas, we express ourselves and cause other people to express themselves. It's a joy, honestly, Phyllis. I'm sure when you do your show, you will see what I mean. It's a joy. And I can tell you that when I experience creativity, it gives me a psychic thrill. I mean, it's almost physical. Wow, this is a new one. We didn't do this before. We're having a creative moment. I love that feeling. But that's so very, very totally subjective. How can you measure this on an objective, a metric basis? How can you say when, me, my organization, my board of directors, my brain trust are actually having a creative moment?
Well, if you want metrics, corporations do this all the time. They reward on creative, output. I would say it's not only a multidisciplinary field, at least the way the American Creativity Association approaches creativity. We're not talking about arts and crafts here, which is what that's the other big thing about this show that I'm hoping will start to get into the zeitgeist of anyone who watches it. The idea that they are creative. People think they're not creative, they can't draw, if they can't sing, if they can't write, then I'm not creative. They think of the creative arts as arts and crafts. And it's far more than that. And so we're talking about it being multidisciplinary in math and engineering and science, in law, in medicine, in home science, in poetry, all walks of life. But it's also experienced in a multifaceted way. Your aha moment, you're getting excited, you lose track of time. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi is a sociologist who wrote the book called Flow, Living in Flow, getting to a flow state. And a flow state.
I saw that on a TEDx. I saw a whole discussion of a flow state on TEDx.
Yes.
It was here on ThinkTech. How do you like that? What a confluence.
Ooh, yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
And so to answer how do you know? Well, I would look to what Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi wrote in his flow states. When you lose track of time, you get so excited. You have a sense of being engaged, that you're learning a little, that you have something, let's say you're playing tennis. And if you play with somebody who's a little worse player than you are, you're not very excited. You're not learning anything new. If you're playing somebody who's 3 or 4 stages beyond you, you're also frustrated and you're not learning anything. But if you're playing with somebody a little advanced from you, those are the conditions that put you in a flow state. You are learning, you're excited, you're in the game, but you're not perfect yet. You're not bored, and you lose all track of time.
Well, so let's go back to the brain trust or the board of corporate directors. And we know we've already established here in this discussion that you want to have more than just you. You want to have diversity. You want to have more than just gender diversity. You want to have all around diversity. And in that way, you have more options on the table to consider. But you're adding something else now. You're adding a person who is a little better than you, maybe a little better than the others on this board in this brain trust. The muse, if you will. You have to chase the muse. Yeah. The muse is just ahead of you, and therefore just ahead of you, and that makes that gives you the impetus, the motivation to be in a creative mindset. I guess the flow state in that vernacular. Okay, so we're establishing our Mr. Potato Man kind of board here. All the characteristics of this board. Right? What else do I need, Phyllis, for this board to operate at maximum? Draw down on your experience with the, the association, the Creativity Association. What else do I need for a perfect board that's going to make $1 billion having, creative thoughts about its business and beyond?
Well, first of all, lose the idea of perfect, because if you're striving for perfection, you're not into the thing, you're into the result. So that's one thing. And I was going to say, one of the things about being creative, and this is so important for our children, I'm going to give an anecdote. When my kids were growing up, I put a label over the front door.
P.S. I'd like to add that Phyllis has 2 kids, a boy and a girl, who are well into their careers now, and who are both totally brilliant. Okay, just want to add that whatever happened there, it worked out. Okay, go ahead.
So I put this sign above the front door of the house, and I called it Mistake City, where mistakes are allowed. So I wanted them, it's so important to be allowed to make mistakes and laugh about it. And he said, what else do you need? You need a sense of safety, psychological safety, personal safety. It's the inward you that you need to look at as much as anything out there. And a sense that you might be alone. We have these genius professors that are in their labs and they make a mistake, and then they're because they knew about the dynamics of what they were working on, they understood how the mistake was the better result. It wasn't what they were going for, but that's that lateral thinking moment where they understand how that fits into where they just were. But if they were worried they were going to get fired or not paid, or that they had wasted their time, if they go into that self-defeated cycle, and if they've been beat down their whole life for experimenting or making mistakes, it's such a tragedy. You leave right there on the floor our brightest and most creative talent. And that's every person on the planet.
So you have to, so part of this little formula we're talking about is to believe in yourself, to open yourself to the creativity that could come out, and but to have confidence. And it seems to me that that's absolutely true, because if you don't believe in yourself, you don't believe in your own ideas, and you don't believe you'll achieve creativity. So you have to, you have to, you have to be in touch with your creativity, which means it's a whole psychological thing, isn't it? Which means you have to be in touch with the best part of your thought process and believe in your thought process. If somebody tells you every day that you don't have it, you don't have what it takes, you won't.
You're a loser. I was around someone who was telling this little boy around me, you're such a loser. You're such a loser. And that's soul killing. So I think the first step of nurturing creativity in the world is to let our kids feel loved for who they are, not what they do.
Okay, so now we have, kind of at least we've touched it. We've touched the definition of creativity. I'm sure there's much, much more that you're going to cover on the creative life going forward. And you're going to drill down on all these things. It's going to be really interesting. But I think we need to ask you how you do this on an institutional level. I mean, take, I don't know, IBM. So I'm in to make IBM a more creative business. I want its board, I want all its management, I want every individual to value his or her own creativity and sharing with others for collective creativity. Boy, that sounds hard to me, Phyllis. Is that what the association is about, and how does it even hope to achieve that?
It's absolutely not only what it's about, it's in its DNA. So in 1988, there were 4 university professors of creativity and gifted and talented, the gifted and talented sort of from the education departments. Paul Torrance, Paul Torrance, the University of Georgia, and he's an icon in creative thinking. Dr. William Nash and Joyce Juntoon at Texas A&M, Dorothy Lamar Dorothy Sisk, Dr. Sisk at Lamar University. They got together thinking about this, and these educators had a marriage with the directors of R&D departments at leading corporations. Those are the 2 focus groups that forged the creation of the American Creativity Association. So there's a clue there. It was like we had Dr. David Tanner of DuPont became vice president of the American and joined the board of the American Creativity Association. And he enlisted like 10 chapters. And what he did was he engaged the R&D department leads for corporations. I have a list here because I was fascinated to reread our history, but this included 3M, Eli Lilly, NASA, IBM, which you just mentioned, General Motors, the United States Navy, Jay, and the United States Air Force, Merck, Toyota, and Harvard University are examples of presenters and attendees at those first years of the conferences. And I have sat in the workshops and the presentations we had 4 tracks. We had a corporate track. If you went to a 3-day conference, we had an educational track. We had a personal development track, and we had a science and engineering track on creativity. So I would sit a lot in the corporate tracks, and they talked about institutionally, and we see that this also in the FANG stock like Facebook, Amazon, Google, these technologies corporations today. They don't require their employees to look a certain way and all talk a certain way, cookie cutter. I know that at Google, they have 3 nap rooms. You can choose your own hours. It is what you're producing, not who you are. So one of the ways that these corporations can engage people who are feeling safe to be creative is to create the conditions that send the message that you're hired for how you think, not so much what you do. What you do will follow from how you think and who you are. And then you get out of the way and people produce. Of course, it has to be in alignment with the organization's vision, mission, and goals, what they're doing, but they're not straight jacketing you to all look and say you're only going to create and all the same kinds of.
So you want to build up this notion of creativity, this I'll even call it a tool. It's a tool of creativity within the corporate structure there, so people are more creative. And I suppose that's very close to the word innovative. So we can innovate our product, our business, what have you. But we have a few minutes left, and I want to inquire on one last thing. So far, we've talked about your personal creativity and mine. We've talked about, the creativity of the boardroom or the management collaborative. We talked about IBM and a whole bunch of other companies who would love to have these directors who appear at, the Creativity Association, take that back to their company. They're self-interested in their own way. Okay, but I want to go further. I'm talking about the country now. We have had a competition with China for a long time. They are very hardworking. There are a huge percentage of the graduates of the colleges in China are engineers, and that means they create things as engineers. They are way ahead of us, I think, in AI and maybe in other aspects of information technology. They are into creativity, whether they call it creativity or some other word. So it's a competition for sure. And in my world, I like to believe that everybody competes in a friendly, egalitarian, kind of socially acceptable way. That may or may not be the future for us. But my question for you is, how do you expect the notion of creativity as propagated by the Creativity Association, individually, in corporations, including multinational corporations, how do you expect this will affect the world?
I think it will be game changing. I think that it will energize the world in every discipline, that creativity and a love and a quest for creative outcomes are adopted. Paul Drucker said that culture eats strategy for lunch every day, and he was a corporate professor. I think that when you introduce creativity, you realign, you reinvigorate the culture in every industry and every discipline around the world. And if culture eats strategy, then I know we have a lot of competition overseas. And I also know that they bring in the US a lot of times, and I don't want to seem elitist at all. That's counter to anything that I stand for. And yet, in a gamesmanship sort of spirit, I will say they do bring the Americans in for the aspects where of what our international friends are doing so well. They're like so there's something about the creative student syndrome. There's a difference between bright students and creative students. Bright students, when they come to school, they have their book open. If it was, they ended the session the prior day at page 40, they have page 41 open. They've read it and prepared for it, and they're ready to answer the question that day, the bright student. The creative student sitting right next to them is sitting there with their page open to page 14 because they want to know they already know that the next page is 41, but they're wondering what's on 14, the flip side. So they know what's there, they see the patterns, but then they play with it and they play it back. So of course, what happens is the teacher calls on student B and says, student B, what's at the top of your page? And he brings back something on page 14 and he gets sent to the back of the room. And the teacher realized he already had read 41, he was playing with 14, and you have a culture breakdown in the room. And of course, that student gets reprimanded because they're bored and they're playing. So what the creative kids, and we're all kids, we play with ideas. We're not too concerned with mastering them. You know why? Because we know we will. If you want to play a game, the best way to learn is not to take the class, but go out on the field, and you'll learn within about 30 minutes. You'll start to pick up because you have to, or you're gonna die on the field. You learn by playing with ideas. And that's the culture thing that I'm hoping to make safe in the world, like Dr. Brene Brown, being vulnerable and creating a culture that allows for play is game changing for our world.
Oh, fabulous. Okay, well, that actually defines uh, what I had hoped to define, namely creative thinking, and it defines the Creativity Association. It defines your aspirations as the president of the Creativity Association and what you can do in various tiers of activity, creativity. And it also defines where you're going to go with this show, The Creative Life. So we can hardly wait, Phyllis. 2 weeks from now, you'll be on the 16th, I want to say, and we'll go further with this. You'll bring in some guests, and we'll we'll unpack each of these things, and we will learn a lot about how to change our world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jay, for changing it with ThinkTech and all that you are, and Carol and your whole team.
Aloha.
Aloha.